Good morning. The time is now 10:03, and I would like to call this public hearing to order. This is the first public hearing regarding an inquiry into the strategic direction of the Cocoa Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, with specific focus on measures to assist in achieving Trinidad and Tobago's diversification objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anthony Vera, and I would like to extend a very cordial welcome to participants and to the viewing and listening audience. We appreciate your attendance here today. Before I ask committee members to introduce themselves for the record, may I just remind participants that this is a virtual meeting and certain guidelines will apply, including please making sure that you mute your microphone when you are not speaking to help keep background noise to a minimum. Adjust your camera so that your face is centered and clearly visible, and ensure that notifications from your cell phone or any other electronic device in your vicinity are muted during the course of the meeting. May I now ask committee members to please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. My name is Wade Mark, member of the committee.
Good morning. My name is Stephen McClashy, committee member. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laurel Lizama-Lising, and I am a committee member. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Foster Cummings, committee member.
Thank you. And may I just point out that members Gopi School, Leonce, and Indar Singh will be joining us a little later. Thank you. Now, I know we have with us representatives from the Cocoa Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago and officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries and from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division. So may I please ask those who will be giving evidence today to please introduce yourselves. Starting with the Cocoa Development Company.
Good morning. I am Jacqueline Rollins, Chairman of the Cocoa Company.
Good morning. I am Kamaldev Maharaj, Deputy Chairman of the Cocoa Development Company.
Good morning. Mala Parajap, Acting CEO, Cocoa Development Company.
Ministry of Agriculture.
Good morning, Chair. I am Suzanne Sherland, Acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good morning, Chair. Chris Ramkisoon, Acting Assistant Director, Policy Research and Planning, Agricultural Planning Division, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you again. Ministry of Finance.
Good morning. I am Sharon Mohammed, Acting Director, Agro-Based Manufacturing Services Sector from the Investments Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning. I'm Juliet Wari, Business Analyst at the Ministry of Finance.
I would just like to remind participants that this session offers a forum for you to share your challenges, your disappointments and achievements, to voice concerns and to make recommendations. They provide a unique opportunity to increase public awareness, understanding and support in respect of your operations. Also, this session is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel. So viewers and listeners can participate by sending comments relating to today's engagement via email to PARL11, so let me call it lowercase PARL 101@ttparliament.org, or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter at ttparliament. I now invite the chairman, Ms. Jacqueline Rawlins, to make brief opening remarks and to provide us with salient information about the company. Madam Chairman.
Good morning, Chairman and other members of the committee. We thank you for this opportunity to appear before you today. We hope that our responses will provide you with a clear understanding of CDC's operation, given the unique and unprecedented hurdles facing the company. We also hope that you will get some insight into the status of the sector and its potential. I know my time is short, so I will not really elaborate on the company's remit, which entails promoting the development of broader cocoa industry, embracing all activities along the value chain, and facilitating the free market mode of operations within the local cocoa sector in areas that were traditionally controlled by government. I will try in the time that I have to make brief statements on the unique issues facing the company and the sector, and then say a bit about how we have been assisting Trinidad and Tobago to achieve its diversification objectives. This company and the sector face many issues. So I will start with the internal issues. Both the company and the country have no approved strategic plan, in spite of the fact that 3 strategic documents have been submitted between the period May 2017 to July 2020. The second challenge is that CDC is operating with a draft mandate. We derive our mandate from 3 sources, which we'll elaborate on later. CDC does not have the legal authority that our predecessor, the Cocoa and Coffee Industry Board, had, so that we are not able to insist that poor quality beans and only beans grown in Trinidad and Tobago must not leave this country. The fourth is that CDC is facing severe financial difficulties, and we are greatly understaffed. This present level of operation is untenable, it is unsustainable, and it cannot continue beyond this financial year. Our ministries of Agriculture and Finance are aware of the situation because we have been keeping them up to date. With respect to the sector issues, we would say that the main challenge is the fact that there is no approved sector policy. Because although there are other policies, if there's an approved, well-documented policy with agreed implementing mechanisms, we will be able to treat with the other issues, the other policy issues. But I will just indicate what are some of the other issues in the sector. Low national cocoa production is major. And among the reasons for the low production, first of all, that more than 70% of the tree stock in the country is over 40 years old, and right now should be replaced. There is a critical major problem with planting material, which escalated over the last 4 years. There's pest and disease, high cost of production, and the unavailability of skilled and unskilled labor. We also find that while we have considerable research taking place, there's need for coordination so that the research can get out into the field. We are beginning to feel the impact of climate change. Quality management is an issue along the value chain, deteriorating infrastructure, and the impediments to investment would be land availability and the planting material. And we are finding now there is increasing competition internationally as many countries seek to be considered fine flavor cocoa producing countries. And the last sector issue that I'd raise is the cadmium legislation. Now, however, in spite of all of these challenges, we can still say that CDC has been able to satisfy most of our corporate governance issues and achieve some positive results in the sector. So, for example, in corporate governance, in spite of our low level of staffing, and I failed to mention that, we are still able to maintain internal controls. We are up to date in all of our reporting. We have completed our financials, audited up to 2017, financial statements up to 2020, but we have not audited those financials because, again, lack of funds. All our directors are up to date in filing of their integrity. Now, with respect to this sector, so now I would say, in terms of the sector, what sort of achievements have we been able to make? Not at the level, certainly, that we would want, but we have been able to, first of all, defend the country so that we can retain our 100% status as a fine flavor cocoa producing country. As a matter of fact, we are about to prepare the next set of defense. We have been able to increase production from 339 metric tons in 2015. We were on the way to 500 for the year 2020, and then COVID came. We have been able to train farmers, more than 500 farmers, in good agricultural practices. We have trained some skilled labor, about 45 CPEP workers. Along the value chain, we have trained about 45 families into spa production. And most importantly, we have a budding, a growing value-add sector. And we now have almost about 100 processors. And the use of our local cocoa has grown more than 100%. As we continue to try to make our contribution to diversification of Trinidad and Tobago, we also submitted a paper for the roadmap committee, in which we showed not only what the sector could do in terms of generating foreign exchange, value add, but even towards food security. We may be able to discuss that possibly later on. So Chairman and Committee, from what I have said, there is absolutely no doubt that the sector can in fact make its contribution towards the diversification of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. But it could only be done in a very holistic, urgent, very active fashion, because our limited interventions so far have borne fruit. So I end by saying that the issues that I have raised and the continuity of the company must be addressed now if the sector is in fact to achieve its full potential. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Rollins. So in terms of moving forward today, what committee members have agreed is that we're going to deal with our questioning in 3 phases. The first phase is going to be in relation to the company's vision, to expand on the achievements you have just talked about, and to look at the company's structure. In the second phase, we're going to go into more depth about the challenges you have just raised. We're going to look at governance, and we will try to get a good understanding of your concerns. And in the third phase, hopefully we will be able to come forward with some recommendations and to have some sort of chart the way forward plan. All right? So is that okay with you, Chairman?
Yes, Chairman. Yes, we are okay with that.
Thank you. And so just by way of background for our listening public, and just to give you also a little feedback, because someone sent me a WhatsApp, I take it is one of the stakeholders. This person has said CDC has a pivotal role to play in the development and progress of the cocoa industry. It would be a disaster if it were to fold up with no seamless succession. Farmers would lose total trust in the government. Field officers and office staff are very good at their job. They offer a lot of support and expertise to the farmers and chocolate makers. They have built up a trust in the cocoa community. So we start off with a very positive note there. And just to put cocoa in context and the company, this is your 3rd incarnation as a cocoa institution. In 1945, we had a cocoa board. In 1962, it went to become the Cocoa and Coffee Industry Board. And in 2014, the Cocoa Development Company was incorporated. So hopefully 3rd time lucky. In your submission documents, and I quote, the company sees itself as the premier institution promoting and coordinating the development of the fine flavor cocoa industry of Trinidad and Tobago. Lower down you see, the company's raison d'etre is to empower stakeholders to be efficient and innovative, to increase production while ensuring adherence to international standards of quality, leading to improved value and a globally recognized brand. And then lower down you see the company's strategic goal is to make cocoa production in Trinidad and Tobago a financially viable activity, contributing to economic diversification and growth of the economy by integration and sustainable development of the cocoa value chain. The strategic plan is intended for use as a performance monitoring tool to guide policies and to help develop programs and focus on specific targets for achievement in critical areas. The goal is to transform the cocoa sector from just the sale of beans to development of the whole cocoa value chain. And lofty goals, and as this stakeholder has written, the company has a major role to play. Now, I love history, and younger viewers may not know that at one time there was a phrase, King Cocoa, and cocoa was king, right? And as the history books will attest, cocoa was king in Trinidad and Tobago from the 1860s to the early 1920s. Trinidad and Tobago was seen as one of the world's top 5 producers. Prices then collapsed, and the witch broom disease took hold, which dealt the sector a near fatal double whammy. In Tobago, the crop held out until 1963 when Hurricane Flora brought production to an end in that island. And yet today, some of the best, if not the best cocoa in the world comes from Trinidad. Yeah, the Trinitario, one of 3 varieties, is indigenous to Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, we talk about our Julie Mango, which is a Trinidad hybrid. Trinitario is again an interbreeding of the other 2 varieties, the Criollo and the Forastero. So we have real history with cocoa in this country, correct? And we have an unbeatable competitive edge. We have the right hybrid, Trinitario, we have the right soil, and we have the right climate. That makes it very hard for competitors internationally to compete with us in this sector. 3 critical things that just happily come together in this country. As you have indicated, Chairman, cocoa can earn foreign exchange. It can provide employment. It can boost ecotourism. It can be a key component in our diversification thrust. Regrettably, we used to export 30,000 tons a year. And as you have just pointed out, today we can't even make 500. Yeah? And yet, because of our certification mark and our Trinitario, we command the highest price for cocoa on the international world market. Isn't that so?
At this time, yes, we are in the higher range. But we can go even higher if we get to the ultra niche markets.
And this brings us to segue into this certification mark. Now, as you know, I am an intellectual property lawyer, and a certification mark is no singular achievement. It's a big deal in intellectual property, right? It's not like your typical trademark. And so I read with great pride that the company developed and registered certification mark of quality in 2018. I will ask to put on the screen so viewers can see our certification mark. So that certification mark certifies to the world that it's a guarantee that all cocoa products from Trinidad and Tobago adhere to the highest international standards. And unlike a regular trademark, the users of this mark is not the company, right? In fact, the company can't even use the mark. It is the cocoa sector, right? So that mark, and show us another example where the mark is used not by the company, but by one of the sector participants. Here's an example of the mark on Angostura, certification mark of quality. So we have a, look at that, double pride. Angostura bitters plus certification cocoa. Yeah? So that mark shows geographic origin, high quality standards, and it's basically a guarantee to producers, to purchasers and consumers that the product in question is of top quality. And here's the rub. Having achieved this remarkable certification mark, we can lose it. We can lose it if we fail to enforce the standards of the certification mark. It can be cancelled. These marks are difficult to get. All right, they're worldwide recognition. They offer Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity to sell, as you have said, at premium prices. But they can be stripped or lost if quality is allowed to drop. Now, when I was at my former law firm, I had an intern, an older gentleman. His name was Aaron Parks, and he had studied law late in life. He was for many years the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture in Jamaica. And Aaron had done great work for Jamaica with the Blue Mountain coffee. And he got them their certification mark. And he was the one that negotiated with Japan for top prices of Blue Mountain coffee. So I can tell you firsthand that if we get the certification mark where we want it to be, we can command the heights of the cocoa sector globally, whether it is with the European community, in China, Japan, and so on. But we need to have, and this is where you talked about in your brief about the need for legislative support, we need to have a quality system that would support the certification mark and to maintain the quality. And I believe you, and when we talk about the concerns, you're going to elaborate on that, right? Yes. So, well done on getting that certification mark. I know that there are other forms of IP that the cocoa sector is very much involved with, plant varieties. I gather that there are about at least 10 or 11 new varieties that are on the horizon. That's a very significant thing too. And also geographical indications. You were the first geographical indication for Trinidad and Tobago. So well done all around. And I'm going to open the floor to members to speak if anyone has any concerns. I think Mr. McClashy had some questions about the quality issues, but my understanding is that can we show the Cocoa and Coffee Industry Act? Your predecessor operated under a statute, Cocoa and Coffee Industry Act. And under that act, there were specific laws and regulations that gave power to the Cocoa and Coffee Board in terms of ensuring quality control. When this act was repealed, the powers and privileges that went with it were also repealed and did not carry over to the company. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that even though you have this certification mark, there is a real concern that if producers come up with low quality beans or they mix those beans with cocoa that comes from some other part of the world, it can have deleterious effects on the sector. And so you need to have the legislative support. Yeah, what will come out of that? Am I right?
Yes, Chairman, I would like to add to what you've just said. First of all, during the transition from CCIB to CDC, when the private sector became involved and there was no institution or so to treat with quality, we actually ended up with some of the chocolaters who purchase our beans actually removing us from their recipe because of the poor quality that left the country. And it is for that reason that CDC identified quality as one of the priority areas, because we had to get back that way. Further, I would have said that Trinidad is considered one of the countries where 100% of our production is considered fine flavor. Now, it's in 2018 that the ICCO, the International Cocoa Organization, introduced the requirement that it's not, you don't automatically become a 100% recognized country. You have to provide them with a dossier. This dossier must also tell them all that's taking place in the country. They have to consider feedback information that they obtain about the quality of beans that you are sending. So, because we are not able, right now we have to use moral suasion to get persons who are exporting to bring them on board in terms of using the quality standard. So that if that is not done, we can find ourselves again coming out of chocolates. And the possibility of losing that 100% recognition, which we have never lost to date, could become a possibility, especially now that you have so many countries all over the world trying to get on that list, because why do you want to get on the list? If you are producing fine flavor beans, you can get 2 to 3% the price of bulk beans. So the issue of quality is critical, and we are seeking the support to be able to ensure that 100% of what leaves this country must meet the minimum standards. That is not going to interfere with the private sector operation. You satisfy the requirement of your buyer, but what's leaving the country must be at this standard and above.
Who determines the quality, if you don't mind my asking?
Okay, in the first instance, we would have, there are international quality standards, and we, a committee in Trinidad with Trinidad Bureau of Standards, and so this committee would have come together and look and accepted these international standards, and that is what this organization is using as the base of that certification mark. So it's not standards that we just came up with; these are international standards that we use.
But you would have a committee comprising members of the company, Bureau of Standards, I suppose, Cocoa Development Company or UE, that would then do tests and make sure that you attain certain benchmarks?
Yes.
And this is rigorously applied?
I will answer, but then I will shortly allow my deputy chair, who is in fact the cocoa agronomist, who is in fact the technical person, to get involved in that answer. But yes, this would have been arrived at by a committee. Our officers are trained, and before the beans leave here, they are subject to this quality test to ascertain that they meet the relevant standards before they go.
Okay, so just to add further to the discussion, a committee comprising a number of stakeholders and institutions and so on worked with the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards and developed what is called the cocoa bean specification and quality requirements, and that carries ISO configuration 2451 of 2017. So that is the major generic cocoa bean standards existing in the country. Now, what we would have done as a company would have been to embark on very concerted training of our farmers and our primary processors in producing high quality cocoa. So much so that we have 60 micro-lot fermenters in this country now who can produce exceptionally high quality cocoa, meeting all the quality standards. And to achieve that, we continue to monitor the process used in coming up in arriving at high quality. The second stage after process though is to test the product itself, which is the cocoa bean, really, to see if it meets those standards. And our officers are trained in doing a lot of the physical quality testing of these beans, so that they can take a lot of bean and test it. And in fact, what we attempt to do, or what we are doing actually really, is that shipments leaving this country, we conduct that physical test on the beans. Now, another aspect of that test is really a laboratory assessment to determine particularly the food safety aspects of quality. And very important for us now, for example, is that beans that are being exported from Trinidad to the European Union meet certain cadmium specifications. You know, the EU, in fact, implemented in 2019 cadmium regulations, which we have to comply with, and so
just to clarify, that is a concern, because that's a heavy metal, and
Yes.
that has health issues. So it's something that you want to eradicate out of your exports, correct?
Yes, well, as many other many other Latin American producers and Caribbean producers, we are faced really with a cadmium problem. We have made a lot of determination studies and so on, and we know exactly what is the situation with cadmium in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm happy to say that it is not as prevalent as in some of the other Latin American countries like Peru and Ecuador and so on. And so what we have developed really is a mitigation plan to deal with where we do have existing levels which are above the maximum allowable limit set by the EU. And just to add though that we would have created this cadmium mitigation plan, and it is within the ministry. Really, we are looking for funding. It's a 3-year plan that we are looking for funding for. However, we are still doing from the company, and we are still ensuring though that beans leaving the country are tested, and to ensure that we do not have a situation where any particular lot of beans leaves the country with higher levels that are
Okay, thanks. I don't want to go into all the technical specifics, but Member McClatchy has been patiently waiting. Member, you had some questions on quality.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm hearing all the discussion with regards to testing the beans when it's ready for export, but my concern is a little more fundamental. We indicated just in passing a little while ago that we are suffering from climate change somewhat, and we can see from our change in rainfall and so on where we're going with that. We have also indicated that we have trees that are very mature, and therefore by extension they would have reached on the top of its curve and maybe now going down. We boast of particular types of, is it the Trinitario or something like that, that we are able to maintain. But my concern is not so much in the now as it is in the 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because what we are attempting to do is to create sustainability in the cocoa industry, and therefore we have to start pushing that envelope either on new strands or experimentation with crossbreeding existing strands that would allow us to compete in the marketplace in the future. And that is a fundamental issue. And therefore, what I'm trying to find out or get some sense of comfort on is what is our medium-term strategic initiatives to counteract those particular elements that would allow us to remain sustainable.
Okay, I will commence the response there, and then again I will let Mr. Maraj come in. I want to go first back. I would have said at the very beginning that there's no strategic plan for both. Okay. I want to indicate that in 2017, the minister at the time commissioned a plan, and there's this stakeholder group of public and private sector stakeholders. And that committee examined the cocoa industry using lessons learned from the oil, the energy sector, where one would look at it in a very holistic fashion, and you would be thinking about what happens down the road. And since then, you found that some of the issues that you were raising were considered as must be put in place. Now, I bring you closer to the now, where Mr. Maraj will be able to tell you that we do have at our Ministry of Agriculture a very good extension, research rather, and your concerns about strains and so being developed to address climate control is going on, actively going on. That those are some of the ones that we are looking to get the IP issues and so on. So he can add to that now from his practical knowledge about what's already taken place that would address your concern.
Thank you. And the issue you're raising there is so very relevant because we have to look at this thing in a full sustainable way, really. And so, for example, the Trinidad selected hybrids, which we started to breed in Trinidad since the 1950s, and that was to overcome the witches' boom problem, which escalated in the 1930s. And so that breeding program produced varieties which were quite resistant, quite tolerant to the witches' boom disease. And I just want to add this very important point here, that tolerance took us straight up to the 2000 and 2000, between 2010 to 2020, straight up. But right now in this country, we are on the brink of a 1928 situation where witches' boom disease almost destroyed the crop at that point in time. And there are two reasons really for that. Number one is climate change, and number two is the fact that maybe the Trinidad selected hybrids, the resistance that they had before is now breaking down. And maybe because there might be the issue of a new strain of witches' boom disease in the country also. But so very importantly, in terms of sustainability, we have to revisit the whole breeding program for cocoa. In fact, with respect to that breeding program for cocoa, that is extremely important because you want to engender more resistance for witches' boom disease in new varieties. You also want to ensure that varieties that are coming out of any breeding program now are much more capable to handle climate change issues. So maybe some more drought tolerance and stuff like that. And you also want to engender in varieties the whole business too of being able to mitigate cadmium. But there are certain varieties which pick up much less cadmium. So therefore, the current breeding programs of cocoa has to be very, very mindful of these new challenges and to be able to produce varieties that can meet these challenges in presently now and in the future. Now on the business of this witches' boom disease, because the chairman did mention the business of what happened in 1928, with witches' boom disease, and it is like this thing is spinning back to us again, and there is something very important that I just want to add here, which has really I mean the disease. When I tell you it is here now in a really bad way, in the years 2020 and 2021, our largest growing region for cocoa, which is Southeast Trinidad, Rio Claro, Ecclesville, Beach, and those areas were only able to produce 5% of their annual production. And those areas' annual production would have been like in the region of 200 metric tons. And this was due mainly to an epidemic of witches' boom disease. And we were really caught with our pants down in terms of this epidemic. And we have learned that and we know for a fact that other countries in Central America and in South America, the major form of defense against witches' boom disease, which actually ravages those countries also, was the development of a biocontrol agent using another fungus to parasitize the witches' boom fungus. and to kill it. And so this is a biocontrol agent. And Brazil, for example, they develop a commercial biofungicide using this fungus, which is called trichovac.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what you're talking about there, I think also segues, because we're still in the phase about the company's vision and the achievements, right? But you're talking about Trinidad and Tobago's capacity to develop new plant varieties, Trinidad and Tobago's capacity to develop antidotes to endemic diseases like witch broom. And so I see these as important components of the holistic development of which you spoke earlier. What I also wanted to focus on, because I want to move on to the next phase to really go into the concerns and the challenges, but on the achievements and your vision, I think it's important that the public understand that when you export cocoa beans, and as fine as our cocoa beans are, as the low rung of the ladder, when you bring added value to the cocoa bean, chocolates. Before we met, I brought some coffee, some cocoa liqueur. Now in Jamaica, they have great pride in Tia Maria, a coffee liqueur. But this liqueur doesn't come from Trinidad and Tobago. It comes from Italy. But there is value added to the cocoa. And that if we develop the value added components, we will be earning much more than just the export of beans. And we'll be providing much more employment than just the harvesting of beans. So I think it's an important point that you have made in your draft strategic plan, that we need to go beyond the low-hanging fruit of just exporting beans to develop the whole cocoa value chain, and not just liqueurs and chocolates, but spas, ecotourism. I mean, people would pay a lot of money to come and go on a cocoa estate and see people dance the cocoa. If you go to Grenada and you go on their Belmont estate, that's a big tourist draw in Little Grenada. And we don't have anything comparable here. But we could really develop, resurrect all those old estates, all the central Trinidad, all the North Coast Road, were we to develop cocoa in conjunction with ecotourism. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that is where we are supposed to go. And if I am, yes, if I go back, I keep going back to the attempt that was made to look at this industry in a very holistic fashion, where we saw that the sector had links with everything else in the country. Okay, and we understood that we needed. The committee at the time was ambitious and felt that we should look at having an industry of about, say, 20 hectares in total of cocoa, that a small percentage will continue to be sold as beans. And the reason for that is you want to stay in the chocolate, those high-end chocolates of the chocolatiers. But then the rest is what you will seek to convert. And we had a ratio, I think probably like a 5%, 50% in food, another percentage would go in spa products, some would go in cuisine. We saw the business of having ecotourism, rural tourism. We had started actually, Chair, before the financial situation hit us. We were looking at even the tourist market, the cruise ship. We had started having discussions with them. We spoke to hotels about taking our chocolate as made here and not imported. But you require other things, just as we are talking about the breeding. You're also looking for skills, because we can't be chocolate makers. We have to aspire to be chocolatiers, because you have to have consistent quality. So my comment is that what you're saying is those are the things that we have thought about. It is to make the right steps to get there.
And I think that if we get the cocoa right, I mean, it will really redound across the board. Now, if one other point I wanted to make about the about cocoa is that when we look at these cocoa estates, we're not only talking about planting cocoa, because the nature of the cocoa plant is it does best when it's mixed with other crops like coffee and fruit like bananas, isn't that so? So the propagation and encouragement of cocoa is not just cocoa, it has spillover good effects.
Yes, quite correct, quite correct. In fact, cocoa estates really is like a, you know, a food security basket for you, because cocoa is traditionally intercropped with a lot of bananas. In fact, most of the bananas that you see sold in the countryside and in markets and so on, they actually come from cocoa estates, and other real food items like breadfruit. You know, you have a lot of peas also in.
I think we've lost connection with the company. All right, they should be coming back on momentarily. While we wait for the company to come back on, I wonder if this might be an opportune time for the Ministry of Agriculture to chip in. Does the Ministry of Agriculture share a similar view with the cocoa company?
Good morning, Chairman and members. Thank you for allowing us to chip in. We certainly do. The Cocoa Development Company has been in constant communication and contact with the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. We already share in projects and research and any sort of support that is necessary. The documentation that is necessary to push us forward to that point where we would like us to be the number one in the world. We have to do that work here, definitely, and we are just getting as much information as possible towards that end, and also the value chain, the value added, that is indeed unique and important in boosting the sector. So definitely we are in support. We concur with everything that has been said so far by the Cocoa Development Company Chairman and Deputy Chairman.
And while you're on it, may I ask, what is the agricultural sector's current contribution to our economy?
Oh, I would ask my colleague, Mr. Ramkisoon, who is here with us now for the technical details there, Mr. Chairman, if you wish. Mr. Ramkisoon.
Yes, thank you, PS. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members. It's about 1%. The contribution is around
1%.
Yes.
And
yes.
in previous years, wasn't it as high as 4% at one point?
I don't think it ever reached that level, just about 1.5%.
All right. So
yeah,
we have a long way to go if we talk about diversifying this economy. 1% is the agricultural sector's contribution to our economy. I hope you all have some ambitious plans.
Chair, if I may, there are some challenges with that, because what happens when raw agricultural products are raw agricultural produce are converted into manufacturing products, it is recorded as manufacturing GDP. So you have the cost centers being in the Ministry of Agriculture, but you do not have the Ministry of Agriculture benefiting from adding that value to GDP. So that is always a challenge that we always face at the ministry. So I don't know if that gives some kind of context in terms of the contribution.
No, that is very helpful. And it is the same point I was making about the difference between raw commodities and then added value on finished products. So it's not as dismal as just the blanket 1%. But it certainly strikes me that the cocoa company offers opportunities for agriculture that far exceed just cocoa.
Yes. But to add to the discussion, about the financial and economic viability that Member McClatchy was referring to, I think we centered a lot on the technical side of the discussion, but we need to have a discussion on the financial side and how can the CDC become financially viable as an entity. And this speaks to the conversion of the creation of products into some monetary, because they are now operating under the Companies Act and they're expected to be a little more, they have freedom of autonomy to operate and determine the way forward in terms of strategic directions and so on. So consideration should be given to even using the Grenadian model, because they produce cocoa powder as a company branded under the Grenadian company. So maybe we could look at those kinds of considerations, because financial viability is a serious consideration. Even though you may be exploring all these discussions, it is not converting quickly enough into a product that can be monetized and contribute towards the bottom line of the organization. So that is basically what I wanted to add to in terms of the conversation and the discussion.
And in terms of diversification, should Ministry of Agriculture not also dovetail with, say, for example, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Tourism, in terms of the chain, the cocoa chain?
Yeah, certainly, and we play a very pivotal role in the diversification process from that context, and the ministry is actively engaging in discussions. We contribute to the commenting on strategic plans of the Ministry of Trade to the Ministry of Community Development, and this is where, when we contribute to the discussions, we add to how the coordination process could occur, so that we can basically arrive at a kind of synergistical, kind of goal-oriented kind of thing. So yeah, that is what is happening here.
I'm going to come back. I have a lot more questions for you, but I think that the company is back on. Is that right? And when the company comes on, I'm going to ask Member Mark to lead the round of questions, because I know he wanted to ask about governance and some of the challenges facing the company. So, Member Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the company back on, Mr. Chairman?
I understand, yes. I'm not seeing them on my screen, but they are.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
We're hearing you. If not, if you're not seeing us, we're hearing you.
We're now seeing you. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you once again, and welcome, Mrs. Rawlings and your team. I just wanted, before I get into governance and the whole issue of challenges facing this company, I just wanted you to let me know, on behalf of this committee, what can be done, or what can we help you in doing to facilitate greater robustness in the context of regulations, in the context of maybe further articles of incorporation, to give the Cocoa Development Company the legal persona that the previous Cocoa and Coffee Board had, particularly as it deals with standards and quality or export of cocoa beans. I would like to get from you, Mrs. Rawlings, how can this committee help your company achieve what is called permanent standards without you having to beg or plead or exercise, as you said, moral suasion? Because this is too important a matter, right, to be left hanging, right? So could you clear the air for us as to the role that we can play in helping your company establish standards, quality standards from a legislative point of view? Can you clarify?
Well, and you use the word legislative. when we submitted our last document, we've submitted a legislative agenda. In this, we were asking to be given some sort of teeth where we could, in fact, we can, first of all, go onto property, and there are two issues. There is the data collection and management, so that we will know what's taking place. Because our predecessor had that authority. So we are asking for legislation that we can demand data. We can go on sites. The second thing we are asking for is to have the ability to protect the country so that beans and whatever, and beans and other cocoa product, because as we get further down the chain, will not be allowed to leave here. That is what we are, and that's is like almost low-hanging fruits, because right now we are seeing the problem. You have to literally go and make, and instantly that occurs. What it's going to do, it's going to bring more of the stakeholders. They will come into the basket. They will conform to the request. So it is legislative requirement, and we have already submitted that with our document previously.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Rawlings, may I also ask you, based on your earlier submission, you spoke about the financial challenges, and you mentioned the severe understaffing of your company, which from your submission appears to be operating at about 30 to just 40% capacity.
Yes.
And you have described it as untenable, unsustainable, and you even went further to say cannot continue beyond this year.
Yes.
What I wanted to ask you is this. What are the factors inhibiting the company from realizing its full capacity? Because you did indicate that financial is real and that there are constant consultations with the ministry. But what is preventing that level of sustainability in terms of capacity building, so that as a very important company in this diversification thrust, you can achieve that goal that is so necessary, both in terms of not only the earnings of foreign exchange, but more importantly, the value added along the value added chain. Could you elaborate for us?
Okay. If you don't mind, sir, I need to go back a little bit in history to answer that question. All right. The company was established to facilitate, to promote the sector with through a free market boom. The expectation is that the company will not compete with the private process. That we would now, in the first instance, have to look for other ways. The services that we provide are what we must charge for. Now, when a company is set up, you normally must start with some kind of capital. This company, when in 2016 started operations, it started with a balance in the bank of $8.5 million. And thereafter, you got 1.8 million. You are bringing in staff. You are not getting, if you are not getting funds for
Just to clarify, Where did that 8.5 balance in the bank come from? Was that from your predecessor board? That was
No. The predecessor board left, I think, 60 million, which would have gone back into the treasury. When this company came into being, the very first board, throughout the entire year, did not receive funds until close to the end of their tenure. And so the company in 2016, when that board demitted office, there was this 8.5 million, and there were just 2 members of staff only. So it was almost like starting a new company. You have to bring in staff, and you bring in almost everybody at the same time. First of all, it took more than a year to get the approvals. It took all of this time, and hence your operation started in 2018. Now, if this is what you have, what do? You are not going to compete to sell beans, so that's not immediately a ready market for you. You cannot immediately start charging the farmers for training them. So you are not going to be getting development funds because your strat plan is not approved. So you are operating using a combination of drawing down on your bank balance and the 1.8. Now, as you move beyond the first year and you are now getting farmers involved, it's costing you more because you are dealing with more and you don't have the revenue yet being generated. So you're finding yourself in this situation. You are not getting additional funds and you're not getting the discussion that would go with why you're not getting, and this is how you could do. So you are now seeking to determine where do I get funds from. So the company would have started, okay, you're introducing farmers to mechanized pruning and so on. We'll get the pruners, we'll do some rental. So you start building revenue very low base. And what you see that where you have to go to get revenue would be things like certification mark on a larger scale, consultancy, subscriptions, the business of providing marketing information, because that's what everybody's asking us for. You have to put up an IT system to allow you to do those things. And if the funding is not there, you find yourself cashed out. So it seems to me at this point, the company has to be assisted to put things in place. With some, yes, you're going to have some kind of timeline that you have to get up and get within a year, 2 years or something like that, but there has to be a start. Because as I speak to you right now, Chair, we find ourselves, Committee Mark spoke about the level of staffing. We are not able to employ more persons. We are functioning, the board members are even functioning with reduced stipend simply to ensure that the operations continue. And the feedback from our line ministry and so that and others have not been forthcoming for us to sit down and put our heads together to address this once and for all.
So Member Mark has raised a very critical point, because these are serious concerns. And if I may just summarize what I gather them to be, and then I think I would like to ask some questions of the Ministry of Finance and Agriculture. But to summarize, you're facing severe financial difficulty, correct?
Yes.
You're receiving a very small subvention annually. The monies that you had in that bank account are pretty much have run out. And you will no longer be able to meet your administrative and development expenditure. So you're basically in liquidation if at the current rate. That's Number two, you don't have the legal authority that your predecessor board had under the statute, and that needs to be rectified. You have a concern about low production, because where we used to export 30,000 tons a year, you're not even making 500. And besides the low production, 70% of the tree stocks are old, have low yields. You have an unavailability of planting material. We heard about losses from pest and disease. And I heard somebody talk about unskilled labor problems and skilled labor problems. And that, of course, would affect how hard pods are being harvested, how they're being fermented, and that sort of thing. You say there's a lack of user data and market information. But and as Member Mark has also said, you're severely understaffed. You're operating at 30% staffing level. You're unable, so you're working with a skeleton staff. And in your submissions, you said you were unable to renew expired contracts. There are staff resignations. So the company is basically diminishing as we speak. And it makes me wonder, and I'm going to ask the Ministry of Agriculture to come on. This lack of support, is the cocoa company an orphan? When I read these submissions, it seems to me as though you're being treated as such. You're forlorn. You've been trying to meet with the Minister of Agriculture since February 2020. When you met with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, you were told that they're not going to entertain requests for funding because you have no nexus with the Ministry of Agriculture. You're operating under a draft mandate because even though you have submitted a strategic plan since August 2017 and you resubmitted it again in February 2019, in 2022, you still cannot get approval. So there's an absence of clear policy. And last but not least, amounts being allocated to the company in the national budget are not being disbursed. So they're treating you, based on these submissions, rather shabbily. And I'm wondering if I can get some clarification from the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Finance to maybe help us gain a better understanding of why this is so and what can be done to alleviate the company situation. Agriculture?
Thank you, Chairman. Certainly I'm in a position now to indicate that for the past few months, we had been attempting to gather as much information as possible that would allow the approach to Cabinet for the adequate amount of funding and staffing. In fact, there's a draft note requesting approval for the provision of funds for the company for the implementation of its full development program, which was submitted to us, and including the filling of vacancies at the company. That is that is in preparation, and there's nothing actually stopping us from presenting it to Cabinet now with a new minister. It is in a state where he's being apprised, he will be apprised of what has happened already for urgent submission to Cabinet for approval. That's the state that I'm at now with the situation at the company. Mr. Amikisun, can you add anything that was presented to Honorable Minister for decisions?
Thank you, PS. We would have commented on the strategic plan and submitted it to the Honorable Minister for his approval, and we are yet awaiting approval and feedback as indicated.
Well, you know, we give a lot of lip service about things about diversification and food security, and yet when these opportunities present themselves, it seems that somewhere along the line we drop the ball. So personally, I think this is unacceptable. Now I know Member Indar Singh wants to speak, but after Member Indar Singh asks you questions, I have some further questions for the Ministry of Agriculture. Member Indar Singh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and a pleasant good morning to all. I want to sincerely apologize. I hope you got my message that I was delayed a bit this morning. I logged in a couple moments ago, and I seem to be not shocked, but this is the reality of what I would call a lack of direction from a government for the last 7 years. And I want to ask immediately PS Sherland, because she said and I stand to be corrected, that the minister was apprised, that is, your new minister was apprised of the state of affairs. So what do you expect differently with this new minister, taking into consideration that for the last, and I know that I have before me some very nice documents here, Development Plan 2021 to 2026, and an inquiry into the strategic direction of the Cocoa Development Company Limited of Trinidad and Tobago, with specific focus on measures to assist in achieving Trinidad and Tobago's diversification objectives. This buzzword, diversification of objectives and so on, even came to the greater fore within the last couple of days. A vice president of a regional, our regional neighbor, placed it back into our faces and so on. But more importantly, PS, I do not expect anything differently. So I am of the opinion that we are spinning top in mud. And is it because your last minister was too busy with fraudulent transactions and so on, land transactions, that you did not have time to pay attention to this cocoa development plan and so on?
Chairman, with all due respect, Member Leasing here. First of all, I'd like to just stick a pin in the wheel right there. Just stick a pin in it. Member Indarisi was asking some questions that that the chairman, the CEO, and the PS are not at liberty to answer, and so I would like him to refocus his questions, please, because I see there could potentially be merit, but he's going on a very, very dangerous political road. So I'd like him to please refocus his question relevant to the business at hand of the company.
Chairman, can I make a clarification here, please? Honorable Minister is about a week and a half in office, and he is in the process of being apprised of the developments at the Cocoa Development Company. In fact, he is planning to meet with the company as a priority and other state bodies, of course, to flesh out all of the concerns that are on the table. So he has not been fully apprised. He is aware, and I could almost certainly tell you that he will seek the interests of this company and push whatever agenda that it needs to be pushed forward to rectify some of the issues that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, well, very quickly, PS, Mr. London. What is the manpower shortage at this entity, and how much capital injection is needed to move the company forward?
Chairman Rollins had addressed that a little bit earlier. Chairman, can I ask you to answer that question, please? You're talking about the Cocoa Development Company, the manpower shortages?
Yes.
Yes, before you came on board, we had discussed that before. Chairman,
what is the level of funding that will be required to meet the operational expenditure in the short, medium, and long term, given the development plans and so on we have before us?
Okay, the Cocoa Development Company had requested an amount in the area of just over 7.5 million in the first instance in their last development report. And in our draft note to Cabinet, we had asked for an amount of just over 15 million. Chairman Rollins may be able to elaborate on the details of the request, but this is what we are looking at so far.
And the manpower shortage?
The CEO will provide you with the details.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have a question from a member of the viewing public, and then I'm going to ask some questions of the Ministry of Agriculture. The question is, what is the current level of cocoa production, and what portion of that is sold abroad?
Let's answer that. Come on.
In terms of cocoa production, when this company started, in 2015, it was around 339 metric tons. And we took that production up to 419 metric tons in 2018. However, and I mean at that time too, we had a projection of 500 metric tons to be achieved in 2020. However, a number of factors worked against us in a very, very serious way. Number one, the COVID situation. Number two, the witches' boom situation, which I described earlier. And number three, we also had another major pest problem with parrots. And so between the witches' boom disease and the parrot problem, as I said earlier, we almost lost like 150 metric tons. So it was really impossible to achieve that 500 metric ton. And of course, when you add climate change to that also, and what climate change is really doing, it is interfering with the entire cycle of the crop. So for example, when the crop is expected to start in October of a particular year, it is now pushed down to almost December of that year. And as I said before, climate change also is a factor accounting for the explosion of witches' boom disease and the epidemics and so on. Because what we have been now.
How much is sold abroad and how much is used locally?
So we down now to a situation of around 300 metric tons. 300 metric tons. Now, out of this 300 metric tons, we have local value-added sector using over 100 metric tons now, and we have about
export is 300.
We have about 300 metric tons. 300 metric tons carried for export.
Chairman, can I just ask one question on that? Just on the metric tons export, please.
Please, yes.
I noted that you said that in 2015 you had 339 metric tons. So is it that our production has gone down over the past 7 years because of the parrot pest problem and a few other things? I just want that to be clear for my own notes, please.
Yeah. So we did experience a dip in production because of those pest problems and so on, and because of the COVID situation too, that actually contributed somewhat to the decline. So yes, from the 419 metric ton, we did dip since then. To the extent that we were only in a position to have, last year, for example, to have exported just around 300 metric tons, and also to have the local value-add sector utilizing at least more than 50 metric tons of cocoa in the country.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, so, is that Member Mark? Is that your hand, Member Mark?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. May I just continue? I had not completed my intervention.
Yes,
I just wanted to ask Mrs. Rawlings whether she can clarify for us whether the Cocoa Development Company is purchasing and selling cocoa beans instead of linking farmers and buyers, because that is a concern, Mr. Chairman, that is emerging. So we need clarification from Mrs. Rawlings as to whether the Cocoa Development Board is involved in the purchasing and selling at the same time of cocoa beans. That's the first clarification I'd like to get from Mrs. Rawlings quickly.
The Cocoa Development Company is facilitating, brokering, getting the big buyers are asking us, coming to us, and we are pointing them to where you're going to be getting certified beans. We have the fermenters who are certified and certain micro lots who can take the volume And these are the persons who, with the support of the company, are in fact handling this right now.
So you are facilitating. You are facilitating.
Facilitating.
Now, may I also ask the agronomist, Mr. Maharaj or Dr. Maharaj, what is being done to deal with the witches' broom disease and the parrot infestation? We know that it is real. We know that it is an epidemic. But we also know that you told us there's a biocontrol agent that has been developed. And I do not know if you have to purchase those from the country, Brazil, that has developed it to bring this disease under control, seeing that it is ravaging the production of cocoa in the area of the northeastern part of the island, where you talk about Rio Claro and those other areas. So can you clarify for this committee what is being done to overcome this crisis?
Okay, so the most feasible control measure for the witches' broom disease at this point in time in Latin America, I'm talking about, is the use of these biocontrol agents. Now we have been unable to access this biocontrol agent from Brazil, which is really the route we should be taking. Now the thing about using the biocontrol agent, it is very effective. It is very safe. It's not a pesticide you're using and so on. And it is really manufactured from harvesting a fungus in the soil. Now, so trichobac is the commercial formulation developed in Brazil. So we had sourced a lot of information about it, but we feel there is some level of bureaucracy right now in the country that is holding back on the importation of this.
Now, Mr. Maharaj and through the chairman, this is a very serious matter. We were going at 500,000 metric tons in 2020. Because of this crisis, along with climate change and the COVID-19, as you mentioned, one of the major problems is the witches' broom disease. So we need to take urgent emergency measures because the livelihoods of farmers are being negatively impacted upon. So we need action very, very urgently. So that is why I'm asking, what is being done by the Cocoa Board in conjunction with the Ministry of Agriculture to treat this thing as an emergency to get the biocontrol agent here in Trinidad so we can save crops, save lives, and increase our production. That is what I'm trying to get at.
So the dialogue has started with the ministry, who has to provide the necessary approvals for the importation of this trichobac. That discussion has started and is ongoing. In the meantime, in the growing areas affected and so on, we set up trials with respect to using other measures of control. So we demonstrated to farmers and so on using cultural measures of control. But cultural measures of control is very costly. So for example, in an acre of cocoa, you're asking farmers to remove thousands of brooms. There is just not the labor to do that. So that
right. Mr. Maharaj, you need help. The Cocoa Development Company needs help. Mr. Chairman, this is a very serious matter, and I would like you to take note of it. We need to provide some guidance and assistance to this company, and along with the Ministry of Agriculture, to treat this particular disease and as a very deadly emergency, and whatever support they require, we should be able to make what the necessary interventions required. May I go on to ask Mrs. Rawlings to let us know whether your current acting CEO, whether there is any move on the part of your board to advertise that post? Because I know that our acting CEO has been in that position for almost about 2 years. So we would like to know what steps are being taken by the board to have this post advertised and properly filled. Can you advise this committee?
But Member Mark, before they get to that, can they clarify? Because my understanding was that because of the company's lack of funds and resignations from the company, 2 acting appointments occurred because they're actually filling the gap. So advertising for a post that you can't pay for might be the problem. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on this. Perhaps our company, you could help me.
Chairman, you probably read our board minutes because it is specifically for that reason, because you can't attract anybody at this point in time. But once we are in a position to do so, we will do it as it should normally be done, which is, the advert.
And what about your production manager? Again, does that arise as a result of your cash trap situation? You cannot engage a production manager within the organization. At this time, Mrs. Rawlings?
Yes, sir, it is all of that, because you cannot, it is production manager, it is marketing, it is your communications, it is all of those positions that you cannot, because you can't attract people. You can't say to them, I am in a position to even give you a year if they're accepting that. So it is for this reason that you are working with in-house until you are able to do it right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, may I just ask one final question before I allow others to come in? And that has to do with the 19th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Mrs. Rollins, we know that you have mentioned the financial challenges and the negative impact it is having. Can you clarify for us whether the efficiency level in terms of the allocation of scarce financial resources in the context of the exponential rise in rent being paid by the Cocoa Development Company since 2018 may constitute an inefficient allocation of resources? That's one. And are you continuing to spend on donation and sponsorship initiatives, right, at this time, given your challenges, or have you and the company discontinued spending on donation and sponsorship initiatives? I know that occurred, as I said, back in 2018, 2019. I don't know if you can just clear the air for our committee as to what has taken place with the exponential rise in rent for this company since then to now. Can you help us? Can you clarify?
Yes, Susan. I'll start with your second question. In terms of this company is in such a financial state that donations, certain subscriptions, none of those things can be accommodated. You are basically, you're paying salary. The company is on one floor. The rent is, I can't remember the figure, something like $20,000. And it is also inconvenient because when you want to have, say, board meetings, you can't have it in the virtual environment worked fine for us. So the answer to your second question is that even if we wanted to, we couldn't. With respect to the first question, the organization was in that tire building for approximately a year. During the course of that year, however, 3 floors, the top floor, the contract was entered into. so that company was not paying that rent. But I don't know, having looked at what transpired at that committee meeting, that any attempt was really made to explain what occurred. And I don't know if you would want me to do so, if it might help.
No, all I'm interested in finding out, ma'am, is whether from the point of view of the company,
right,
whether in your cash trap situation, you could not consider finding more reasonably priced accommodation for rental purposes, rather than being saddled with this huge rental commitment on a monthly basis. That is what we are trying to clarify, and if you can guide us on that, we will appreciate.
Okay, but the answer to that first question is that at that time, the organization could not get a rental place cheaper than that. And let me finish. This organization, this CDC, inherited the location at 22 Yard Street. Our predecessor had occupied the entire building. The then board, the first board, and during the transition, when they were down to just about 5 members of staff, took a decision to use the top floor only. And hence, what you would have been comparing was a top floor rental at 17 with, which would not have and could not contain all of the staff as you started to hire. The building was also not OSHA compliant. The landlord at the time, however, indicated a willingness to make it compliant, but the rent was going to be increased to 60-something thousand. And hence the board took a decision to look around. There were about 4 or 5 locations looked at. And the prices, the rental ranged from 45 plus VAT to 100 and something. All of them, with the exception of the one the organization finally took residence in, required injections of capital to make them right. The average rental to accommodate would have been like $50-something thousand plus VAT to the 100. And this building that the organization went into, initially looking to take 2 floors. However, the landlord at the time indicated you can get the entire building with 6,000. And knowing 6 additional thousand, the board at the time knew that they had the authority, while not using the entire building, they could sublease it. But since this strat plan there were plans to utilize the whole building in terms of staffing, training, of allowing processors to come and make their stuff here. It was the intention that when cruise ships came in, that they would come here, and that the top floor would be utilized for consultancy, because one of the things the organization is supposed to do is to make the organizations outside there business. So discussions were already being held with like accountants and attorneys to take the top floor, who would give our clientele, stakeholders, special arrangements. So while it seemed there, you needed to go into the financials and realize that all of it was not being paid.
Mr. Chairman, all I was attempting to get from Mrs. Rawlings is what is the current rental arrangement? Because remember, this company is operating at 30% capacity. Yes. And what we are being told from our 2018-19 experience is that they were renting a building at an exorbitant rate. And all we were trying to see or trying to extract is whether efforts were made to get at a place that is more reasonable, because if at this time, and in closing, Mr. Chairman, if at this time Mrs. Rollins can tell you on our behalf, one, what is the current rental arrangements at the location they are currently at? That's firstly. Secondly, how many floors are in the building? And thirdly, how many floors are currently being actively utilized by the Cocoa Development Company? We just want clarification to ensure that there's efficient use of scarce resources at this time. That is all we are trying to clarify.
So, thank you, Member Mark. Yeah, so Member Mark has asked very specific questions. If you can just go 1, 2, 3, and just.
All right, so the answer,
directly.
the rent, the present rent is $24,000 plus VAT. The company is occupying 1 floor only. And that is the answer for both the second and third question. 1 floor.
I think so for the record, the company is it occupies 1 floor of a building for which it pays $24,000 plus VAT in rent. And I think the assurance Member Mark wanted to get is that in light of your complaints of dire financial circumstances, every cent you spend is a critical spend. It's either going to be staff or rent or important contracts and projects. That there's no money left over for donations or for trips or anything superfluous, correct?
That's right. There are no donations, none of those things. Just as you said, it's rent, salaries, and the utilities that would go to function.
And just to echo Senator Mark's concern, if you were able to find accommodation that may have been cheaper, but and just as good, is that a possibility? And would you look to utilize that opportunity?
Yes, because we did in fact raise it with our line minister at one point in time, whether we could have, any of those buildings and so could have been made available for us. So we have been looking up.
So, do any other members have any other questions? Because I have a couple more, but I don't want to hog the floor.
Yes, Chairman. With your permission.
Yes, please.
Very quickly, could I be advised? I heard about this rental sum of $24,000 plus VAT. Are there any outstanding payments as it relates to for this rental accommodation based on your critical cash flow situation?
No.
Absolutely none. So rent is being paid and it is being done on a timely basis.
Timely basis, yes.
Thank you very much. P.S. To you, based on the inability to get releases and so on from the Ministry of Finance, has there been a continued dialogue between, let us say, you as Permanent Secretary with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance to identify what are the problems that are contributing to this cash flow situation or timely releases from the Ministry of Finance?
Thanks, Mr. Narsing. Actually, we do get timely releases to cover salaries for the Cocoa Development Company. They get a subvention from the Ministry of Finance through the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries every month, totaling about $2 million per year. I would regularly speak with the PS at Finance generally in the context of accessing funds under the stimulus package, because that's another avenue that we have been looking at. And the note that we are reviewing does talk about accessing funds for the company under the stimulus package. So while it is not near enough, we do get a subvention, we do provide a subvention to the Cocoa Development Company on a monthly basis, totaling to about $2 million per annum.
Okay, Chairman, thank you very much, PS. With respect to, I don't know if within the organizational structure who may be able to guide this meeting and provide the information. With respect to the, and I do not know based on the fact that I joined late, so if it was addressed, well, fine. With respect to the strategic, strategic plan 2017 to 2022 that was revised as of the November 2017, and I'm trying to find my notes. I think it was on page 24 as it relates to rehabilitation of, just give me a minute here, rehabilitation program. It identified identification was going in the direction of where the company will have oversight responsibility for new planting of 2,000 hectares annually on suitable lands. Have there been any development with this particular initiative?
No, committee member. No. We have been, in terms of new lands, rehabilitation has been taking place on existing cocoa lands. Rehabilitation in terms of normal pruning and so. In some cases, they need to supply new plants for the rehabilitation. That
this particular initiative which has been identified, absolutely none?
No.
Has there been any identification of the 2,000 hectares that was envisaged, any part in terms of through the Ministry of Agriculture and so on and state land?
What has occurred is that we are aware from our census that we have almost 4,000 hectares of land under cocoa. About 45% of that is abandoned. And contact has been made with some of these owners who tend to be what we call the larger farmers, where you would have like and large for us is like 20 hectares and over. And the feedback that we've had recently is about 16 of them with an acreage of about 1,002 hectares thereabout, who are interested in going back into cocoa production. What are some of the problems? They need some capital and they need planting material. So we have identified that group. Some persons have also approached the Ministry of Agriculture directly asking questions about state lands. Well, that hasn't really come under us. Occasionally we have been asked in some cases where people are looking at probably land that may be in the ministry's station, we asked our views on it. So that's the answer generally. We have identified some abandoned land.
Yeah, so this rehabilitation program, which was probably a new initiative, this hasn't gotten out the ground. Is it in a state of abeyance? Is it abandoned? Is it no longer?
No. It's not abandoned. As a matter of fact, it is our thinking that we have to actively, and when I say actively, as recently as months ago, our officers who are still back out have been making contacts with persons who we know own land, seeking to get them back involved and for us to have a rehabilitation program going. There are other components to the rehabilitation, and those are some of the things that are presently slowing us down from making this happen.
And do you have an idea of this quantum of capital injection which may be needed to give that sense of support that you have alluded to? And all that is to potential farmers and so on. And what about this issue of new plantings and so on? How much capital that you may need?
In terms of new plantings, in our document, we indicated that we would need about 1.9 million to rehabilitate 1,296 hectares by the year 2026. So that's the figure in this document for rehabilitation of about 1,300 hectares.
Based on the direction you want to go, you are comfortable you will get the necessary funding for this initiative based on the state of affairs?
I would like to leave this meeting with a better sense that is possible. We have been very concerned as to where the funding would come from. There's been some discussions in terms of are there joint venture partners willing. A lot of our local landowners are more inclined to do it on their own. They don't really want to have possibly foreigners be part of it. Okay, but
final, with respect to the pilot labor intervention program that was identified on page 22 of your strategic plan, has there been any development with this particular issue as it relates to identifying workers whose competencies will be honed in to undergo a project of certification to TTNVQ standards based on occupational standards developed and approved for the sector?
That entire thing has not, in terms of all of the certification, hasn't gone much further because that was part of a national strategic plan which has not been approved. In terms, what CDC has done on its own in the interim is to liaise with CPEP, and we were able to train 45 persons who are providing labor in some of the areas. That is as far as it has gone. These persons are not certified. The desire is for the sector to reach the point where you're going to have both skilled or uncertified and certified labor, because that's where you have to go. It is not a case of you just come on and pick a cocoa pot like that. It has to be, you have to be trained. So it hasn't gone further, and it is something that we would still like to see. And I know the Ministry of Labor is quite keen on that. They have been having discussions with us about moving forward along those lines.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you very much, Chairman. I'll hold for the word.
Thank you, Member. So, Madam Chairman, it must be very gratifying for you to hear this morning that the new minister will be considering the company's position as a matter of urgency and importance. If I may ask the PS a couple of questions, and this will be the last round under this phase of quality issues and challenges, and the next phase will be looking at the way forward. But PS, when we talked about the lack of nexus, all right, and the inability to treat with funding requests, how are these going to be addressed?
Well, actually, we're in the process of addressing it, Chairman. We've gained quite a bit of ground over the past year in terms of getting the connectedness of what cocoa development company is doing and the impact on our farming community and the sector together with a lot of information that has been provided largely by the cocoa development company. And I'm in a position where now I can present these and review what we've already done, present it to our new minister and review an already drafted note to cabinet to allow for the development program funds to come in, at least 7 million, as well as to staff the cocoa development company adequately. So those are going to be presented to Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister is actually scheduling meetings with state bodies, and I provided a priority listing last week, which where CDCTTL is at the top. So we are in the process of getting that nexus together, and I think the future looks bright for the company.
And on the issue of funding, I know one of the things when you have a certification mark is that it attracts opportunities for international funding as well. Are there opportunities, for example, from the EU or with IDB or other and are there any impediments to such funds being made available to the company?
No, I don't see any impediments, but actually that is also something that has happened and is happening right now. Company can clarify, but the FAO is assisting in our project, and there is nothing that is stopping us from looking at other opportunities. The EU, we met with them recently, and we spoke at length with the predecessor about boosting the cocoa sector of Trinidad and Tobago. So that is also very promising. EU has sent us more information on its bank in the European community to access funding. So yes, nothing is stopping us, and we are pursuing those avenues.
Great. Now I could see Member Lizama leasing ready to go into the next steps. So I'm going to be quick here. But I'm very interested in relationships and the intersecting line. So my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that apart from breeding and the reproduction of varieties, the Ministry of Agriculture per se took a backseat when it came to cocoa management. That was pretty much under the control of the Cocoa and Coffee Board, correct?
Previously.
Right. Yes. And so it was a board that managed the cocoa sector by and large. Yes. Does the Ministry of Agriculture have the resources to do what this company has been set up to do?
The present CDCTTL?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
So that of the organization, yeah.
So there's no situation here where the Ministry of Agriculture thinks that this can the ministry can handle these new initiatives and rather instead of the company. The ministry sees the company as an important ally there.
I think so. Yes, that is my personal view. But yes, definitely, and I think new minister would probably agree with me, because we are more and more allowing partnerships and collaborations to occur. The ministry has a quite robust research division that has already been collaborating not only with CDCTTL but CRC and other like organizations. So the meaning of the company is valuable, and we definitely would like to see CDCTTL strengthened and resourced and working along with them.
Right. So you actually consider this state enterprise as an asset of the country.
Definitely.
And so what does the ministry see as fundamental or key to developing the cocoa sector to its fullest potential?
First of all, is the financial resourcing and the staffing. Those are, in my opinion, those are the key areas. We have the opportunity of lots of state land resources available to us. We have the technology and the know-how available to us. We have the interest from the international community coming into us. We have to support ourselves financially to get further into developing the sector.
Mm-hmm. And having looked at the draft strategic plan, what you've said now, does the Ministry of Agriculture have a clear picture of what the end game would look like, where there are overlaps, for example, like with trade and tourism and environment?
I would think so, but I really would like to speak more with Honorable Minister on that to get his ideas and his views. But the end game looks promising because the opportunities are tremendous in the sector.
Right. Now, in previous debates, particularly most recently where we did away with the, I can't remember which board it was, we've talked in the past about food security at this committee with the national flour mills. We've from time to time touched on constraints negatively impacting the agricultural sector. So for example, issues pertaining to land security and security of tenure.
Yeah.
Limited access to financial and other support services, whether it is veterinary, seed, banks, that kind of thing. Tardiness in adopting new technologies. Lack of concern for negative environmental impacts, predial larceny, livestock theft, and poor roads and weak transportation networks serving our farmers. Now, ironically, in the 19th century, the cocoa sector was better serviced in terms of infrastructure than it is in the 21st century. Because in the 19th century, you had a train line, and you also had a ferry that went around the island and serviced on the North Coast and all of that. So what is being done by the Ministry of Agriculture to do away with some of these negative impacts?
That's a tough question. I think more collaborations, and when you collaborate together, you are strengthening your output. That is something that I will have to be discussing in more detail with Honorable Minister, and prioritize how we would press forward. But we have been seeing more and more recently the increase in public-private partnerships and collaborations with organizations, and to me, personally, that is the way to go. But of course, I discuss this with my colleagues, and we get the response even better to you next time.
All right, thank you. I have no questions further on this phase. I don't know if any other member does. Otherwise, I'll ask for Member Leasing to take us with a start on the way forward and recommendations.
Thanks very kindly, Chairman. Hello again, members. Chairman, I have to say though that you ended off that section really well, and the responses by Madam PS have been rather satisfactory because the beginning of this meeting was quite grim. So Madam PS, thank you very much. I appreciate your responses to all of the questions that were posed, and I appreciate as well that there being a new minister, you need the time absolutely to speak with him and the other two ministers, and he needs to speak with his other cabinet colleagues insofar as moving forward the way forward the end goals with tourism and trade, etc. And so, Mr. Chairman, I know that we will have some things in writing to send to the Ministry of Agriculture coming out of this meeting. So, Madam PS, we look forward to getting your responses when we send that to you. To the Chairman of the board, Ms. Rollins, I wanted to ask, please, this document here, the Cocoa Sector Development Plan 2021-2026. Thank you very much. It's a rather comprehensive document. I want to ask you on page 29, the goal of the Cocoa Development Company, the development plan. The goal is to make cocoa production, cocoa beans and cocoa products in Trinidad and Tobago a financially viable activity, contributing to economic development, job creation, economic diversification by integration and development of the cocoa value chain. Now, I know we've discussed this before. I want to ask you, moving forward, will this goal, do you think, in your opinion or in the company's opinion, is this goal going to stand as this, or are you going to revisit this goal, this document, and some of the things in here? A few other questions on the policies in here. And I just want to ask you, please, if you're going to stand with that, or you're going to revisit that?
Yeah.
It's on page 29 of the document of the Cocoa Sector Development.
Page 29, but
21 to 26, page 29.
Let's see that.
The CDCTTL Cocoa Sector Developmental Plan 2021-2026 dated July 2020. Page 29.
What we're looking at?
The goal for the beginning.
Page 29. This is page 29.
The goal. The goal she was quoting.
It's the goal. It's just the goal of the company.
Oh, a different page.
It would fall under the broader topic of the mandate of your company.
On page 25. All right, so we are now looking at it. Let me. The goal. Okay, so the specific goal on page 26, if you're asking if we are going to revisit that goal continues to be relevant. It continues to be relevant.
Do you think in moving forward that you need to revisit it and probably do a little more groundwork in order to build up on it?
We certainly have to do to relook this in this environment, because there are things that are not said here that must be in place for us to function. Starting from the goal and how we conduct business. For example, if I start with what is our role? Our role is to facilitate and to coordinate this sector, right? We have to, we thought when we were looking at it in a national plan, that at policy level, there should be coordination, say, by permanent secretaries, because we are going to be crossing boundaries. And this company is going to coordinate with the other players. The actual goal, in my mind, it continues to be current. We would have to add things, all of the sustainability issues, the breeding issues, to ensure that we are looking at all of the gaps and everything that is relevant for the sector to really achieve this goal. So the answer to make sure that this is achieved means, yes, we have to look at it to ensure that we are going to be covering all of the gaps. We have to ensure that there's that.
Please go ahead.
Yes, we also have to ensure, one of the things that this has been an issue in attempting to do this is that we have been all working in silos and not coming together so that the same scarce resources can be done. And if our role is to facilitate, we have to ensure that that's part of what we do so that the sector can in fact make the contribution across the chain. And hence, we may have to re-examine this to ensure that it can be achieved.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. My question is really based because of the introductory remarks that we would have received and the commentary that followed in the discussion, that there is some work to be done. We noted in the comments, and Chairman raised it, about the nexus between the ministry and the CDC, which is a little interesting to take note of. And so I am just concerned that there will be some paralysis in moving forward if we were to just
start from here.
And Chairman, that's the only thing I wanted to ask on this matter. And I would like to come back in after when more people ask questions, please, because that is very concerning to me. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Member Mark.
Yeah, I do want to follow up on some other questions as we try to address the way forward. Now, one of the areas we would like to have clarified has to do with what I would like to consider to be the challenges faced by this organization. Now, the organization is receiving, according to the PS, on an annual basis, just under maybe $2 million or above $2 million. However, we have no internal audit or auditor. We have no accountant in the company. And therefore, it begs the question, how are we to properly account for taxpayers' monies that are being annually expended can we rely on the sincerity? And I have no problem with the people who are before us, their integrity, or do we stick to established guidelines, rules, regulations, and the law? So when you look at the State Performance Manual, there is a provision for an internal auditor. When you look at the Exchequer and Audit Act, there is in fact a need for very powerful internal controls. So I'm trying to get from the team that is here, along with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Finance, what is being done to address this matter. And this has been going on since 2017. We are now in 2022. So we need some answers from the team that is here with us. We need answers from the Ministry of Agriculture, and we need answers from the Ministry of Finance. So, Mr. Chairman, through you, can we get some clarification on this matter, please?
Yeah, and Member Mark, I want to endorse and echo what you have just said. I think right now, what the company has been talking about has been basically a matter of survival. We are dying here. If something is not done immediately, we are gone through. But once survival is no longer an issue, the company is not entitled to apply. As Member Marcus pointed out, once you have regularized your nexus and you're getting the funding and the support you need, you have to come up to speed. You have to be in full compliance with the State Performance Manual, and that includes having the internal controls. So Member Marcus raised a very, very important point, and I would like to get your comments on it, please.
It's for us. The company, the board had taken a decision some time ago that we would seek to engage or to outsource the audit, internal audit function, because it was going to cost us less, but we would still have that being taken care of. Again, although it was actually something the board approved, the funding was not there to implement it. At this point in time, I cannot really say to you that we will, I should say it this way, we know we have to have some internal audit function. I cannot say to you as I speak that we will create in the organization this position or whether we will continue to outsource. But what I will share with you is that we really have to re-examine certain things, because, you know, it seems to me as we go further, and if we really get not just on track, but start to move forward, there may in fact be a need for some form of audit function, but an audit function that is not only relevant to the company's internal operation and financing, but may even want to take us out into the field to do some audits of what is there. And it may be something that as a board, once we know that we do have the support and we can in fact move forward, we may have to re-examine. So I cannot really say to you now. What I can say is yes, an audit function has to be in place.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is the second round where we are having a challenge with the same company. And I really believe that we need action. We cannot continue to be spending taxpayers' monies on a company without any accountability insofar as internal controls are concerned, rather. I am not querying the integrity of any of the members of staff. nor the members who are before us. I am saying that we need to have an internal audit function established ASAP. And we cannot take it for granted that we can get answers that really do not satisfy the laws, the rules, and or the regulations. That is why I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, that we need to go beyond the cocoa company and go to the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Finance for answers to our questions, because this is a very serious matter. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask you to direct our concerns to the Ministry of Agriculture and then later on to the Ministry of Finance Investments Division, we can get some guidance again before we decide to take whatever steps we consider to be prudent in the public interest. So can I ask you to get from the Ministry of Agriculture what is being done with the internal audit function?
So noted and agreed, Member Mark. Well, in the interest of avoiding tedious repetition, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, can you address Member Mark's concerns about the need for accountability and transparency and good governance, especially where the audit functions are concerned?
I'm hoping my colleague from the Ministry of Finance could direct us adequately, because once all of the information is absorbed by Honorable Minister, we can then decide on the approach you are taking for any kind of audit for a state entity, right? It is not anything that's unique. We've done it for other state entities, but I will be guided by the Investments Division at the Ministry of Finance.
The Ministry of Finance, we are aware of the challenges that the company is undergoing. However, given that the role of the line ministry with regards to the operations and funding of the company was a bit hindered, we look forward to the new directions, and we will continue working with the Cocoa Development Company in order to have them implement their internal audit function. We wish to say at this point in time that the company is meeting all of its other requirements with the state performance monitoring manual, with the exception of the financial statements, the up-to-date, where we have draft and this function. And we will continue to collaborate with them. And we will also collaborate with the line ministry, that when they get the appropriate funding for the company, to ensure that the funds are released on a timely basis, so that implementation of these crucial and critical functions can be done in a short time.
Mr. Chairman, quite apart from the internal audit function, we do not have within the framework of this company any written policies and or procedures for project management, for risk management, and for fraud policies. Can we get an undertaking from the Ministry of Finance and Agriculture that they will work in collaboration with the ministry, with the Cocoa Development Company, with a view to having these procedures properly written up and submitted, well approved and submitted to this particular body that is before it? We'd like to have that provided to the JSC on state enterprises in writing, Mr. Chairman. So that is something that we will have to write to these organizations and agencies on, so that they can comply with the rules of the State Monitoring Manual and the Audit and the Exchequer and Audit Act. May I ask, Mr. Chairman, through you, I raised the question about the production manager, but I wasn't aware until recently that the production manager was there and the production manager resigned in 2021. Now, I don't know if the board can provide this committee with the reasons for the resignation of this particular production manager. Through you, Mr. Chairman, can we get some guidance?
The productions manager's contract had come to an end. And again, because of the company's financial situation, we would not have been able, or we could not offer him a contract for 3 years as he previously had. And he was not happy to accept a shorter period.
Yeah. In terms of your external auditor, who does your external auditing for you? Because I know your last financial statement would have been audited, that is, was in 2017. You did indicate that you have done some work between 18, 19, and 20, but again, because of funding, you have not been able to complete it and formally submit same. Can you tell us how soon you'll be able to complete those financial audited statements? And maybe the ministry can help us on that as well. And do you have an external auditor, Madam Chair?
Yes, we have an external auditor, Bertram Hadway and Company. The financial statements for those years, 2018 to 2020, they are completed and they are awaiting audit.
And is it because of financials you cannot proceed?
It is a lack of funds that's prevented us from having the audit conducted.
Mr. Chairman, through you, can we ask the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Finance Investments Division, can they guide us as to how they can come to the assistance of the Cocoa Development Company so that they can complete their financial audited accounts for 18, 19, and 20, respectively?
Indeed, I'm sure that the Secretariat, after we meet in caucus, will have some letters to send out following up on all of these points you have so correctly raised, Member Mark.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you can take over.
Thank you. Does any other member have any other question or comment in terms of the way forward?
Chairman, just one particular issue, because our cocoa, we have all identified in terms of its importance and what it could do to foreign exchange and generation and help in relation to the diversification of our economy and so on. But in relation to where we are, this whole question of initiating and support intellectual property protection related to regional and estate brands, could probably the chairperson of the board could elaborate on that in the context of where we pride our cocoa brand in this country. And
remember, we had dealt with that at the beginning.
Okay.
The whole question about the certification marks and the intellectual property, but thank you for raising it, because it is important. I would like to segue from something you have said, though, because I think in terms of charting the way forward, it's important to put this in the context of the green economy. You know, we talk about diversification, but the green economy, I am convinced, the green and the blue economies are going to be far more profitable than the extractive economy. But we need to start investing in the green infrastructure. And we need to really be more forward-looking as to what type of green businesses there are. So for me, the Cocoa Development Company is sort of like a bellwether for ecotourism, carbon capture, agrivoltaics, all of these new buzzwords, I think is something that we should be looking at in the context of the green economy and whether Trinidad and Tobago actually has a plan for a green industrial revolution, a green new deal, you know, that would allow for new high wage jobs, that would allow for us to overhaul our old fossil-based infrastructures, that will allow for us to upgrade plant and machinery to achieve maximum energy efficiency, to build resilience against climate change and climate change related disasters, and to work with farmers towards cutting emissions from the agricultural sector. So I think it's important to be mindful of the broader picture and to, in terms of moving forward, to recognize, and this is again what Member Indarsing was alluding to when he talked about the intellectual property. We do have a competitive advantage with the cocoa sector, but what we need to do is to ensure quality, to increase production, and to meet our delivery commitments on time. I think the cocoa company, as is recognized by the Ministry of both Finance and Agriculture, the cocoa company has huge potential, but that potential will be unrealized. It will get nowhere without support and without having in place the mechanisms for internal controls that Member Mark alluded to. In terms of, sorry?
Chairman, just to add to what you have said, don't forget, Mr. Chairman, the need for the company to consider financial sustainability and autonomy, because one of the areas that the Ministry of Agriculture alluded to earlier is the ability of the company to engage in value added. So apart from the exportation of our raw cocoa beans, which is of a high quality, how can this company get involved in the value chain down the line? So itself can brand, as you were indicating about the Jamaican coffee, they can brand their own cocoa powder and begin to sell those products and gain income, gain revenue. So as we prepare for the way forward, it will be important for this company to share with you on our behalf some of its thinking as it relates to financial sustainability and autonomy. Because Mrs. Rollins did talk about seed capital. They need a start. They need a help. They need some help rather, maybe for a period of time, 2, 3 years, 4 years, and then you let go of them and they can fly as far as they want in the sky. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe that is an area that we need to give them some encouragement on and they may be able to share with us how they can bring about greater financial autonomy for the organization.
Very passionate delivery there, Member Mark, but I fully endorse you and what you have said there. And you took the words out of my mouth, because in terms of going forward, we definitely have to focus on developing the value chain. It can't just be about producing beans. Thirdly, I think we need to set up a quality system that is going to support the certification system. That is fundamental, because if we lose that certification mark, it's going to set us back big time. Fourthly, we need to get compliant with the manual. We need to have all our internal controls and functions put into place. We need to have our relationships properly mapped out. Government must give clear policy mandates. Government must provide the necessary funding, and government must pass the necessary legislation and regulations to enable and empower the company to do what it needs to do. So those are my notes. I don't know if any other members have any other concluding remarks and comments before I invite the participants to give their closing remarks. Okay, then may I invite Madam Chairman for you to give your closing remarks.
Chairman and members of the committee, I want to thank you on behalf of the members present here today and on the company for giving us this opportunity to be here with you today. I hope that our response have our open, frank, honest response have addressed your concerns. I actually thought that at the beginning that we were going to be enlightening you in terms of the sector a bit, but what has come out is that the committee has a good handle and a good understanding of what's taking place, and we appreciate all of your heartfelt passion, your inspiring questions, comments, and we really look forward to your recommendation. We accept the advice you have given so far, and we leave this meeting with more hope than we came. we really look forward, and the company really wants the opportunity to carry out its mandate and to be partly and mostly responsible for cocoa achieving its full potential. So I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. May I invite the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Agriculture for her closing comments.
Thank you very much, Chairman, members of the committee and colleagues. I am heartened to hear that you brought up the blue and green economies as the future, because as you know, the pandemic has brought agriculture to the front burner. And certainly in Trinidad and Tobago, we are seeing the effects of, not having enough production when we have great potential. In the Caribbean region, in CARICOM, we've been talking about food security. There's a task force, we are an avid member. We are talking about trade in commodities. We haven't been able to talk in any great deal about the trade in cocoa, but the potential is there. The future is bright with regard to economizing on the blue and green sectors. And I thank you for your knowledge already. You gave us an interesting history to start off with, and your evidence of your liquor. And you and your committee are quite knowledgeable and have asked the most pertinent questions that we have to answer. I am even more armed to take the concerns of the committee to Honorable Minister Hussein and Honorable Ministers Singh and De Freitas. We are going to be meeting very soon, and I'm sure that we're going to have a positive result and progress towards strengthening the cocoa sector. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, PS. Ministry of Finance representatives.
Thank you, Chair and members, colleagues. The discussion this morning has been very informative. I took note of the initiatives and the discussion, especially from the Ministry of Agriculture. And the Ministry of Finance Investment Division gives us commitment to continue to work with the Cocoa Company Development Limited and also with the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure that the company will achieve its strategic goals. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to thank everyone very much for your contributions today. They will be very useful for this committee in its future work on the subject and in drawing up a report and recommendations for action to the relevant authorities. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our business today, and this meeting is now suspended. In closing, may I thank the Cocoa Company, the media, and the viewing and listening audience. Thank you. All right, members, I believe we are alone.